Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to you in the US there, Natasha. My name is Ben Churchhouse, and I'm the host of the HR Congress podcast. I'm joined today by Natasha Bowman. For nearly 20 years, Natasha has labored to transform the American workplace from the inside out. As a champion for employees, she's worked with a broad range of organizations as a C-suite HR executive to create an engaging environment which employees are respected, genuine leaders are cultivated, and top performance is achieved. Natasha has developed a reputation as an expert consultant through her firm, Performance Renew, and a thought leader for organizations like 4As, Translation LLC, Freeman Company, Wiley Publishing, and Manhattan College. She has also served as an adjunct professor of human resources at institutions such as Fordham University, Manhattan College, Georgetown, and the Jack Welch Management Institute. In 2017, she published her book, You Can't Do That at Work, 100 Legal Mistakes That Managers Make in the Workplace. And so it's my great pleasure to have you with me today, and I'd love to have an interesting chat about a lot of things we've got on the agenda.
Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm good. It's very hot and warm here in Budapest.
The same in New York.
Summer isn't my favorite season. I'd take winter any day. Obviously, this is the first time we've met, and in the form of a podcast, it's probably not always the best time to get to know someone. So perhaps you could tell me a little bit more about yourself and how you came to realize your journey in the world of human resources.
Yeah, so I'm Natasha Bowman. I'm originally from Montgomery, Alabama, which is a mid-sized town in the southern United States. And I am a labor and employment law attorney. But early in my career, while working for Walmart Stores Incorporated, I was actually transitioned from the legal sector to the human resources side of their business. And that was at a time when they were going through significant transformation in their employment practices. And I was asked to join a team there called Employment Compliance, where we retooled and rethought and transformed all the policies and processes and training for managers, and just really looked at how we were managing employees throughout the United States. And I decided I really liked the HR side of things rather than the legal side, because I could be more proactive rather than reactive. So I stayed on the HR side and worked for Walmart for several years in their corporate office, and then relocated to New York as a market human resources manager, where I oversaw from a human resources standpoint about 13 locations across New York, and left there, transitioned there, went to be a healthcare HR executive, and then just a few years ago founded my company, Performance Renew, which is a leadership development, talent management consulting firm. In addition to running Performance Renew, I'm a professor, as you stated, at several colleges and universities, and I'm also a professional speaker where I travel the globe talking to leaders across the globe, across organizations, about cultural transformation and creating engaging and positive workplaces. In addition to my professional life, I'm proud to say that I'm a proud wife and a mother of two.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the moniker that I've read in one of your descriptions of the workplace doctor. First of all, how did you get the moniker of the workplace doctor? And following on from that, what is the most common ailment that you are diagnosing in the workplaces that you encounter? And why is that the case?
Thank you for asking about that. I get that question a lot. How did I get that moniker? So I had developed a reputation throughout the organizations that I worked for of really transforming cultures through reducing legal liability significantly in those cultures to zero to almost none. And I did that through cultural transformation. And one day my boss said to me, after realizing how I was able to put strategies in place to do that, like, oh, you're a doctor, you're able to come in and realize what's ailing the workplace and prescribe a remedy to it. And so that's how we kind of came up with the workplace doctor, and we kind of laughed about it. And then it just kind of stuck with me. And so that's how I got the moniker. And when you talk about some of the common ailments that I have found, it is that toxic work environment. And, if you read online through social media or websites like Glassdoor or any of those websites where employees are able to leave feedback about their current or former employers, that's often what they're writing about. They're not writing about or giving feedback about pay and benefits or things like that we traditionally think what drives culture or engagement in the workplace. They're really writing about culture, and they talk about their bosses' leadership styles, whether or not there's a lot of bully bosses or if there's a lot of layers of hierarchy within the organization. They talk about their ability to have access to opportunity to promotion and what are some of those common barriers to promotion within organizations. And that's really what drives culture. That really what makes up culture. So some of the common things that I see as I go in and out of organizations that are saying, hey, we're having a hard time being successful in meeting our goals, or and that's due to a high turnover rate, or that's due to low engagement amongst our employees. It's common because the common issue is that there's a toxic workplace culture. That's what I'm seeing, and that's really where I'm focusing a lot of my efforts these days.
And on the topic of culture, organizational culture itself is relatively easy to define and quite often sometimes even easy to assess, especially looking at it from the outside perspective. But it is a very difficult thing to actually change and change for the better. So what must, in your perspective, HR and business leaders be aware of when approaching such a transformation task?
So I'm going to approach this question by disagreeing with the first part of your assessment that
Please.
that organizational culture is easy to define and assess. But when I find it is when I'm going in and out of organizations is that what they have written on paper as their organizational culture is not necessarily true in a practical standpoint. So, we have organizations that think they have this highly engaged culture where everyone has a sense of belonging and inclusiveness, but they also realize that they're not reaching their organizational goals. They have defined success and they haven't gotten there yet. So when I'm brought in, what I'm able to realize is that, and be able to diagnose, is that their assessment of their culture and the level of engagement and inclusiveness is not at the peak of what they think that it is. So I think organizations have written what they think their organizational culture is on paper, but it's not true in practicality. So when I come, I do a different type of assessment and really assess what I like to call a sense of belonging in an organization for employees. And there's a difference. A lot of organizations assess engagement, how committed and loyal employees are to the organization. And that's great. We should be assessing that. But we also need to assess their sense of belonging, meaning how do they feel, where do they think, rather, do they think they feel they belong in the organization? Do they feel they can be their most authentic selves? Or do they think they have to come in with a sense of what I like to call covering, where I have to hide certain traits or attributes or characteristics about myself in order to fit in with the cultural norm? And if I'm working while I'm covering, oftentimes it gives you the false positive of I'm engaged, I'm here, I'm committed, I'm loyal, I love working here. But on the inside, I'm not really showing you my authentic self. And I'm actually giving more time and energy to covering, hoping or feeling like an imposter. And we've heard that term quite often here, imposter syndrome. I'm feeling like an imposter, like I'm not supposed to be here, or there's something about me that just doesn't belong, rather than really working at my peak performance. So organizations, going back to your original question, they really have to do a better job at defining what their culture is, what their values are, meaning what you're willing to do and not do to reach your organizational goals, and then assessing whether or not each employee feels as if they are aligned with, or whether or not that culture and their values are really being seen and heard in the everyday behaviors of their leadership.
Just following on the point of authenticity, and I know it's a word that gets thrown around a lot these days, but what does this word really mean to you?
It really means to me that I can come to work And regardless of my background, my experiences, my characteristics, and my traits, all of those things that make me the individual that I am fully accepted in the workplace. I'm not having to cover, I'm not having to feel like an imposter, right? I'm able to throw my ideas out there, and my ideas are fully considered and accepted and not immediately rejected because maybe it's thinking outside the box or thinking outside of those cultural norms that we tend to have within organizations. Again, when we think about authenticity, and like you said, that's the new word there, the buzzword across businesses and organizations, is because we are starting to realize the more that we accept employees for who they are and not try to box them into organizational norms that we have put up, the better that employees are able to work without having that fear that they don't belong there, without having that fear that it's something about them that won't be accepted. We've got to get rid of those silly assumptions, of what we think makes a great employee in order to move forward in organizations. I wrote a post yesterday, or not yesterday, last week on LinkedIn. I don't know if you've seen it. It's gone viral. It's gotten 7 million views so far. Tons of likes, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of shares. And in that post, I talk about just this subject, but in a different way. I talk about how I have hired people who don't necessarily have a firm handshake. I've hired, mothers who have 4 kids at home, but are committed and loyal to the organization. I've hired people who have a criminal past, and they are not executives in organizations. Because when we think outside of the box and we think outside of those cultural norms that I talked about, then we're able to get that diversity of thought that we need in order to be successful, in order to mirror our clients and our consumer base and those that we are trying to fill that business need.
So sometimes leaders make mistakes, whether it's due to confusion or some other error, and employees and organizations do suffer as a consequence of that. Without needlessly pushing people down, how can HR professionals build trust in their leaders and organizations, whether that's them themselves or the people in their teams, so that their organization and their employees can succeed?
I think we have to work with our organizational leaders and build a culture around transparency and accountability. And sometimes that's hard for HR leaders or any HR person within organizations because we think we don't have the power to do that. We think that we don't have the authority to do that. And I think we need to step outside of that notion that, although because we are HR, we don't carry a certain amount of weight or we don't carry a certain amount of influence when it comes to talking to our leaders and being transparent with them. I think we need to push that notion to the side and really be bold and courageous with how we talk to our organizational leaders and be very transparent about what we are able to see as far as what are those toxic things that are happening in the workplace. What are we doing right? What's really driving engagement, and what do we need some work on? But in order to do that, it does require a level of courage and a level of boldness there, and not to be intimidated by the lack of title or the lack of influence, and realize we do have the influence that we need. So we have to ensure that when we are approaching our organizational leaders and we're bringing these mistakes to them or these things that we know that they could be doing to improve the culture and success of the people, we've got to come to them, number one, and show that we are their business partners. We understand the business that we're in. We have a grasp understanding of that. We're not just here administratively to, process benefits and payroll. No, we are truly strategic business partners. And that in order for the business to succeed, to be strategic, we've got to weave in the culture of our organization. We've got to weave in our employee engagement into that overall business strategy. And if we start talking the business of the business that we're in and making the business case that creating these positive work environments and eliminating these barriers to success, eliminating these bad behaviors by our leadership, it will really drive business results, then our credibility and our influence will flourish throughout the organization. And I've been able to do that starting in organizations where, I felt like HR wasn't really acknowledged for the value that we bring. And that's some of the strategies that I've been able to do to build the HR team into a team of credibility and influence.
So given that the HR Congress will be taking place this November in Nice, and we're going to have quite a few HR professionals there, it's really a soapbox to discuss the most burning issues in HR at the moment. So what is one hard truth that you would like HR professionals to take heed of?
The hard truth is that over the course of time, and this is global, not just in the United States, is that we have lost a lot of our credibility with employees. And employees are finding other ways to address their concerns in the workplace, whether it's going through regulatory agencies, whether it's getting help online. There's apps out there that are helping employees to navigate through the workplace landscape, or whether it's just going to the media and protesting and walking out. All of these things we have seen over the past couple of years. And what we have heard is that our employees don't trust HR. One hard truth is that we have got to rebuild our trust and credibility, not just with our organizational leaders, but with our frontline staff, with the organization as a whole. And we've got to do that by being courageous. And I think that that's difficult and it's easier said than done, but we've got to speak up. We've got to speak out for what's right for our workforce and for the people that we are advocating for. I get the question all the time, who is HR here for? Management or the employees? And my answer is always, those two are not mutually exclusive, they're mutually inclusive. Whereas if I'm advocating for employees, I'm advocating for management. So there is no one or the other, they are the same. So I see myself as an employee advocate because if my employees are thriving, then leadership is thriving. So we've got to be bold and we've got to be courageous, and that's just the hard truth. We can't just sit back and not be afraid to speak up about what is driving the toxic work cultures that are rampant throughout organizations throughout the globe.
So you'll be presenting a pre-conference workshop and a track session in the organization and leadership track at the HR Congress this year. What can attendees expect from your sessions?
They're expected to hear more about what we've just talked here today. I'm very, very excited about the pre-conference workshop, designing and building, a culture that engages, includes, and motivates. We're going to go through exactly what we've been talking about today. Number one, we're going to talk about common issues that are being presented as barriers to engagement and to motivation in the workplace throughout organizations. And then we're going to talk about all of these strategies we can put in place to bring down those barriers. We're going to talk about what's working in other organizations and what's not working in organizations, and how we can prepare for the workforce of the future. What the workplace looks like today is not going to look the same in the next 5 to 10 years. So I've done a lot of research on what are those trends that are happening within workplaces that we need to be ready for in order to make sure that our employees continue to feel motivated and inspired and that sense of belonging.
Wonderful. So how can people get in contact with you if they wish to learn more about you or for any questions or any comments?
Oh, I welcome that. So they can visit my website, performance-renew.com, performance-renew.com. I'm also on social media on LinkedIn, Natasha Bowman, JD, STHR, and on Twitter and Instagram at The Workplace Doctor.